Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Azuru Plays A Case of Distrust. So, in the last episode, after the game crashed, I was gonna record the next bit, but I didn't hit record, so my bad. But basically, what happened was it was literally 2 minutes of 1 minute me checking who Frankie was and saying that I was always available to come back and talk to Frankie if I needed more help on a case, and then I decided to leave. And while I was leaving, Frankie calls back on me and he's like, hey, what's your goals? What's your 3 goals? What are you planning on doing? And where are you planning on going? So the 3 goals that were mentioned, I think, were to figure out where the letter came from, why did someone send it to Green, I guess, and to learn a bit more about who Green is so that she isn't unaware. And then the 3 locations that she would want to go and figure these things out are the place that Green suggested were the suspects, so Stable Barbershop, so that's the first place, and then there's also the Tin Spoon Lodge where the wife sings, and also the house, so we can decide where to go. So I think today's episode will start off with going to a location to get some more information. Yeah. So I don't know where I want to go. I kind of want to go to Green's house, but I also want to go straight into the barbershop. Maybe we need to know a bit more about Mrs. Green. Then we go to Green's house, and then we go here. Yeah, because let's figure out who Green is. The Tin Spoon Lounge was a speakeasy in North Beach run by Tiny Paul, the gangster that Green had put in with. I had never been there. The mob keeps a tight lip about their own houses, but I figured it would be a good place to chase Green's bootlegging story. So we go there. I grabbed a taxi cab and told the driver where I wanted to go, and I thought about talking with him on our way there. The driver was somewhere in his 50s, but he drove like he'd soon be dead, bounding through the streets and honking at anyone in his way. Making a good time, I commented. Bah, he exhaled, like an old ship captain. Congestion. All these motorcyclists and none of them know how to drive. Lunatics, the last word he shouted through the window. You see, Life magazine, he continued. 30% increase in auto deaths this year to last. 14 years the year before. Most of them pedestrians. We crested another hill and my head bounced off the hard ceiling. Most folk run out of moonshine at home and take the car to speakeasy. Can't even walk and then think about they can handle the road. The car's tires squealed as we rounded a corner. Well, not me, sister. This car leaves when I put my foot down, and you just gotta know what you're doing. We screeched to a halt at my destination. I stumbled out of the taxi cab as quickly as possible, thankful to still have every limb. I opened the cab door. In front of a North Beach warehouse with a wooden sign. The sign wasn't too worn for me to decipher any of its English, but a small grey spoon was still visible below the letters. Ooh. I rapped my knuckles twice over the large metal door. The panel just above my head slid sideways to reveal a pair of eyes. The eyes looked me up and down and then just stared ahead. They were black and held no emotion. The room beyond was dimly lit, so I couldn't see much of the surrounding face. I cleared my throat when a rumbling voice emerged from behind the doors. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, as all our great thoughts shrinking less. I looked at his eyes, still unmoving. I understood. The doorman wanted a password. I thought I might have something in my notes that could help. I don't think I have anything that I could. repeated his line back to him. Yep, that's what I said to you. But ain't what I'm looking for. The gentleman wanted the password to conclude his riddle. Fill full your cups, feel no distress at all. Our greatness thoughts shrinking less. I don't think I have anything that... I don't know what that is, but it ain't the password. Came the response, and the small window shut with a thud. Reputation was a joke in San Francisco, and most speakeasies would just let about anyone through the door, but the mobs weren't as relaxed as their rules. I knew I couldn't enter until I'd say the correct response. I wonder who I could ask about a speakeasy password. Maybe we have to go here. Green's house might contain more clues about his past, or some reason a threatening letter would come to his way. And if I got lucky, Miss Green would be there to pump more questions. I waved down a taxi cab and was on my way. I thought I might talk with the driver a little to pass time. I don't think I want to do that every time. I peered out the window until we arrived. The Greens' apartment was a section of an old Western addition mansion. The owners had divided it for struggling families to rent after the 1906 fire. Once downtown had been rebuilt, people of means moved out to the area. Recent immigrants, mainly from Japan, rented most of the apartments in this part of town. I knocked on the front door and didn't get a response. The latch was undone, so I pushed it open and stepped into the room. The apartment had a dense cloud of black smoke hanging from the ceiling. Apparently that window wasn't open much, and either Mr. or Mrs. Green smoked heavily. Grey trench coat was hanging in the doorway. It certainly looked identical to Lewis's. I searched the pockets and found no identifying marks. It might have been a different jacket, but its recent appearance picked me off. The bottles on top of the round table were almost empty. I opened the drawer of the backmost table, and in it were 2 train tickets. I stumbled to St. Louis to myself, but then came the cackling voice of Miss Green. Ha! Forget about moving, Connor. I won't budge. Her head was raised, but her eyelids still remained closed. I asked her further questions, but her head just looked back to where it had been. There was nothing else that she'd say. At least she looked dead. And I thought she was how she's slouching. The ashtray on top of the smallest table was overflowing with spent cigarettes. A whittling plant was on the furthest table from the door. I could never keep plants alive either. Even as the petals fell, they were still a vibrant yellow. She's been drinking some bottles. Empty bottles were strewn around the apartment. I brought one to my nose and smelled the distinct aroma of laudanum. Opium mixed with booze, a harsh tonic. I found Miss Green slumped in her chair, eyes closed, head rocking slowly. "Hello, Miss Green," I said loudly. She let out a long moan from the chair, and then lifted her head, but failed to raise her eyelids. She tilted her head to the side and giggled, and then let it loll back into place. I shook her slightly, and she moaned, but said nothing more. There isn't anything here that helps me out. The frame was just wrapped enough to prevent the front door from completely closing. Okay, so we'll go here. Green suspected Redstone Stable of sending him that letter. Apparently Stable owned a barber shop in the financial district. I figured there would be no harm in asking Stable about it directly. Ooh, she has balls to go in there straight away. I stepped into the taxi and rocked into a comfortable position on the back seat. I thought about starting a chat with the driver. We'll have a chat this time. When the driver turned to ask where I wanted to go, I saw the striking blue eyes look years younger than the greying temples beneath his woolly cap. I was curious about his history. I struck up a conversation, which led to his past life. Ever heard of the Suicide Club, he asked. I admitted I hadn't. Bob the Goat coined the phrase. Poor guy ate a runway for his last meal. War pilots, I asked? Half right. We was mail carriers. Uncle Sam was training us for the military. Shame so few of us made it. I asked why he left. Rumour said the average pilot lasts 900 hours, likely not far off. Flying with no lights, no emergency landing, barely a weather report, never a parachute. What do they expect? Glad you're driving a taxi cab now, I asked, as we pulled up to my destination. My wife is, but I miss flying every day. He turned to tip his cap, and I saw the sparkle in his eyes. I thanked him for the ride, and left the car. The barber shop was down an alley in the financial district, opposite the red brick National Bank. The small bell above the door twinkled, and as I walked in, the two sides of the mirror's frames were cylindrical, painted blue, red and white to look like a barber's poles. They clashed with the otherwise elegant furnishing. The modern hydraulic barber chair had always seemed ostentatious to me, but this one, with the soft brown cushions and gold embroidery, was the most ornate I'd ever seen. Oh, ornate means like ornaments. Stable's cabinet was similar to my own, but where mine was dull grey metal, his was a deep red wood that looked heavy. The hat rack was a deep mahogany, engraved with the gold lettering that read Frasers and Co. Furnishing. The maroon leather chair looked comfortable. It seemed elaborate for a barber shop waiting chair. There was a tall man in the centre of the room. He was wearing a flamboyant pink suit, tailored to accentuate his stature, with a maroon bow tie and pocket square. I gathered this was Redstone Stable. The man turned to face me. He grinned, and his squinting blue eyes made the smile feel genuine. I must apologise, he said. We do not take walk-ins. He looks kind of cunning. I told him why I was here. I'm not here for a shop, just some answers, Stable. He scolded. Oh, Miss Malone, you know you are not a standard detective. Please do not be as mundane as all the other sleuths. I asked how he'd known my name. He tsked a few times and said, Miss Malone. That is another dull retort. His eyes became dull. What is it you want with me? He didn't seem to like my straightforward approach, and I had no time to mince words. I needed to get information and move on. I pulled Green's note from my pocket and showed it to him, and didn't let him hold it. Green tells me this letter is from you, I told him. He doesn't like the threats. Stable lowered his head to study the note and then chuckled. His knowing grin returned to his face. But this is a black hand letter, he said, flourishing a hand towards the paper. Have you ever seen a black hand letter, Miss Malone? I confessed I hadn't. Exactly. You should try ringing your friend Shipman at the station and ask him what it means. Sam Shipman had been one of my uncle's regular partners in the Vice rackets. I wondered what Shipman could have to do with Green's case. Stable seemed to think that he had a lot to do with it. I pocketed the letter and continued with my questions, but I made a note to stop by the police headquarters and see Shipman. Well, Miss Malone, he smiled. Will there be anything else? This is the like opposite side. I showed him something in my notes and I got no good information about exchange. What do you know about Green's past? I questioned. Only he has constantly skirted the law. I nodded. Well, Miss Malone, will there be anything else? Oh, I feel like there's something else I should be looking for. Risk it? I can't see how this is relevant to anything I've said. Can't just reply. Well, yeah, okay, so basically this is my case so far. Excuse me, please. Green claims you bootleg, I stated bluntly. His grin didn't waver in his response. Would you hang me on Connor Green's claims? I may partake in some gambling, and I may have talent for it, but it's nothing illegal, I assure you. And you know nothing about Green's own bootlegging? I asked. Stable shook his head. I doubt he would ever answer a question straight. Well, Miss Malone, will there be anything else? Let's ask about his bootlegging. I don't even know the bootleg. This is called a grey coat, if he knows. Okay, that's it. Nothing now, I said, and turned back to the barber shop. I looked around the elaborate barber shop. Nothing different, I don't think. Okay, the front door had a bell on top of it. Okay, I need a passport for here, and I need to go to the police station. I always dreaded visiting the PD after I'd flown the coupe, and I was in no mood for it right now. But if Shipman did know something about Green's note, I'd have to chase it up. We grab a taxi, but we don't chat. The North Beach station was SFPD's headquarters, also poetically baptized the Hall of Justice. The building dominated the corner of Canary and Washington in Chinatown. Rebuilt after the 1906 earthquake, I thought it looked even more sour than it had before. I strode to the young bobbed girl behind the large oak desk. She must have been new, because we shared no recognition of one another. I asked for Shipman, and she motioned me to a chair as she pressed the pearl button. I sat down, and she disappeared through the frosted door. I rolled another cigarette to pass the time. Between the puffs, I thought about my history at the department. I imagined the station captain would have been furious had he known I was there. I did, after all, break a tumbler with the help of another officer's temple. That had been my last day on the force. It wasn't long before Shipman walked out of the frosted door. Great, now I get to talk to Shipman. Samuel Shipman smiled when he saw me. He was tall and tanned, with a clean haircut and polished shoes. He had warm eyes and was generally empathetic to victims and suspects alike, but his appearance belied his ferocity. When by the book failed, there weren't many lengths too far for him. He judged officers purely on results, and because of that, he was one of my few fans on the force. We exchanged brief pleasantries before he said, "Wouldn't come here for glad handling." He had a habit of removing the subject from his sentences. "What needs doing?" I explained my case to him. He scoffed when I mentioned Connor Green. Working for that pinhead. Got a good mind to run him up a flagpole. I just need to know about this letter. I handed him the note Green had given me and explained the context. After looking it over, Shipman tried to stifle a laugh. Complete bunk, he said. See this symbol in the corner? Mark of the Black Hand Gang. Except Black Hand letters are always ransom letters, not threats. No foothold on this coast, anyhow. Never been one in California. So the letters are fake? Shipman nodded. Someone's trying to imitate the Black Hand. I grunted a sigh and noted what he said. Don't know if Green is trying to get one over you, he said, or if someone else is pulling Green's leg, but having more dirt on the man couldn't hurt, especially if he's your client. I agreed. I've been trying to dig through his past. Got any spunk on him? Shipman shook his head. No, from Oakland? It's all I know. But I can do some more digging. I thanked him for that. Under a pile of ice, though. Might take me a while. Why don't I telephone when I find something? I had no office where I could receive messages, but I dreaded returning to the station. I told him to call Southern Coffee. Just leave anything with Franklin Conway, I instructed. He said that was all right. We traded goodbyes, and I went back to the station's entrance. Okay, so we know a few bits. Now I knew the letter was fake, and Shipman was looking into Green's past for me. I just needed to chase up the bootlegging lead. I stepped into the street and thought about where to go. Okay, let's go back to... Shipman said he'd call Southern Coffee if he had found any dirt. I could go there to see if there were any messages. Of course, if I get stuck on the case, a stiff drink with Frankie could give me a hint as well. Maybe Frankie knows the password. So far, we know that we need a password to get into the tin launch place, and Mrs. Green is like knocked out, drunk on like some drugged up booze, and apparently the guy at the other place, the other bootleg place, is just a bit weird. Didn't really want to tell us much. Frank was still behind the bar. I wondered if Shipman had left any messages for me. Of course, if I was stuck on the case, a long drink with him might be helpful. Whilst eating, you could ask about the notes. Let's ask about this. The tin spoon doorman kept me outside the joint. He wants a password, but I've no ideas. Fill full your cups, feel no distress. At all our greatest thoughts shrinking less. He says, who need gangsters of the riddling type? Frankie laughed. All our great thoughts shrinking less. What? I asked, puzzled. He turned and grabbed a bottle from his shelf. Vintage stuff, this. Strange that they'd use this for the bear got too excited. Strange that they'd use it as their code. He handed me the bottle, and I read from the back of the label. Fill full your cups, feel no distress. At all our great thoughts shrinking less. We'll do a good deed, nevertheless. So the password was the poem from this vintage label. I now knew what I had to say to the doorman. I thought about what else I'd like to speak to him about. I sat on my regular stool and rapped my knuckles on the bar. Any messages, Frankie? I asked him. And what do you mean by that? Well, I told Sam Shipman, an old contact of the force, to leave any dirt with you if he'd found it. Frankie laughed. So now I'm your bartender and your secretary. Say, if I'll become your housemate, will you at least pay me? So I guess you haven't heard anything, I said. Nothing yet, Miss Chief. Frankie chuckled. Shipman's supposed to call you about Green. What have you got so far? No real breaks to speak of, I said. Well, alright, I'll let you know if this Shipman fella gives me a call. I thanked him. What else you got? Is there anything else I want to ask Frankie about? Oh, maybe tell him about this. Never mind, okay. So we'll go to the Tin Man place and then we'll end the episode there before we move on to the next stage. Thin Spoon launch. I still needed to talk to Tiny Paul and I hadn't given the correct password at the Tin Spoon entrance. I knew I'd never get into the place until I said the magic words. No, and nevertheless we'll do a good deal, something like that, right? I grabbed a taxi cab and told the driver where I wanted to go, and I thought about talking with him, but we won't. It's time consuming. We might do it a couple of times throughout the series, but I'll tend to skip those. Knock again. I again rapped my knuckles on the metal door. The panel slid and the same dark eyes stared down at me. Fill full your cups and feel no distress. At all our great thoughts shrinking less, he repeated. He continued to stare, unwavering. Let's use this. And we'll do a good deed nevertheless. We'll do a good deed nevertheless, I recited the line that Frankie had shown me on one of his bottles. The eye squinted. Wait here, came a gruff. The panel slid shut, and I heard footsteps walking away. I rolled a cigarette and waited. After a quarter of an hour, the panel opened. Bar's closed, but you can shoot Paul in the upstairs room, said the eyes. He pulled the door ajar so I could see a set of metal stairs. I walked up the stairs and opened the thin wooden door to the billiards room. It was much smaller than I expected for a gangster's paradise. The only light came from the hanging lamps above the billiards table. The haze of cigarette smoke darkened the room's corners. Start off here. A couple tall chairs were placed around the billiards table. The pool table was the focus of the space, the light reflecting from its smooth green surface tinted the den. The room was lit by the dangling lamps above the billiards table. The rack of the wall held 5 cues. Oh, somebody's here. A clean ashtray sat next to an emptied glass on the table in the corner. A tall, broad-shouldered man playing the table by himself. Based on Frankie's description, I gathered this was Tiny Paul. Ooh, good, Tiny Paul. I cleared my throat to give him to look at me, and then followed with a casual, "Are you ever going to take a shot?" He stood up straight, rested his cue on the table, and looked at me sideways. It was the petulant look of a boy who was forced to play with his younger sibling. "Hello," he sighed. His voice was deep, apparently very only hired baritones, but it had no gravel. It echoed slightly around the room. I imagined he could have puffed and puffed the entire block to rubble. "I like watching them," he said, nodding to the balls on the table, thinking about my options. I never shot much, Paul, but I thought he might like me more if I finished the interest. I considered lying to him, telling him that I played a lot. Honesty. I'll stick to cards. I didn't lie to him just then. "Stud, blackjack, or bridge?" he asked hoarsely. I raised an eyebrow and he showed a sheepish grin. "A gambler plays them all," he continued after cracking his knuckles. "But I don't think you're here for a game." Let's do a different approach. I asked for a drink, mine pouring as each a growler. I hoped getting Paul's lips wet might make it easier to grab something out of him. but he wasn't having it. Paul sighed. "We're closed here. You'll have to come back later." He seemed annoyed at my stalling. Not nice. Talking to a stranger. Talk to Green. "You like Green?" I asked. The wrinkles on his brow deepened. Like or dislike, it doesn't matter sometimes. I'll work with what's given, and he's giving us a good lead. I suppose that's why you're here, Malone. So you'd known me too. The doorman must have looked me up. The bay talks faster. "Anyhow," he said, eyeing the billiards table, "you need anything else from me? If you want something, better ask specific." Mumps has never failed to grate my nerves. He couldn't tell me anything unless I pushed him with what I already knew. So we'll go with... What do we go with? We talk about Green's letter first. "Know anything about this note?" I asked, and pulled out the letter with the black hand on it. Tiny Paul looked at the page, then laughed with his whole body. "So there's his letter, Green, shaking over. I'm not losing sleep though. Look, Green and I aren't the best pals, but nobody will touch him without protection, and none of us sent it to him, or else I'd never known about it. Anything else?" What else can I ask him about? Ask about the wife. "Green's wife is a torture here?" I asked. Paul smiled. "With the pipe she's got built into that body, she's the reason most fellas keep coming back to the joint." Okay. So you're giving Green the dough? I asked. "That's right," he said. "We give him the cash to get the supplies going." "You already gave him the money? Aren't you afraid he's gonna run out on you?" I asked. Tiny Paul frowned. I guess you know less than I thought. Well, just to set you straight, that kid's right under my thumb. No way he'd get out of town alive before setting our past horses." He turned his gaze into the pool table. "Anything else?" Ooh. Oh, I can't ask him about that. I can't ask him about that. Maybe ask him about this. "You know Green's note is a fake," I said. "Well, somebody's goofing Green." He laughed heartily. "Or maybe Green's just toying with you." He blew chalk off the end of his pool cue and asked anything else. I asked more about the bootlegging, but all that I got me was a frown. Paul refused to give me any leads on that front. Any evidence? Ooh, could ask about that. "What's that got to do with any of this?" he asked. I tried to press him further, but got nothing from it. He sighed. Apparently, he's eager to get back to his game. Ooh. Okay, so he doesn't want to talk about that either. So far I haven't got much. Vincent claims he doesn't bootleg. "Know anything about the Redstone stable?" I asked. "Heard the name," he replied. "But why all the gossip? He could tell you more about himself." "You won't give me anything on him?" "No, why would I do that? Anything else?" Okay, so there's definitely something fishy about that barber guy. considered telling Tiny Paul about Green's tickets to St. Louis, but if these mobsters thought about that Green was about to blow town, they'd be liable to dig him an early grave. I knew I needed to solve my case, and for that I needed my employer alive. Maybe after it's all cleared up, I'll mention Green's tickets. I must have been lost in thought because Tiny Paul said, "Can I get back to this already?" I didn't have anything else to say to him, so he cracked his knuckles and arched over the table and resumed lining up shots. I don't think there's anything else I could have asked him. But yeah, and I think this is a good place to end the episode because we'll have to figure out, probably go back to Frankie and have a chat to him. But stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys in the next